Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone, and welcome to today's webinar, Management Systems in the Era of COVID-19, A Consultant's Perspective. My name's Amy Wayne. I'm part of the marketing department here at Perry Johnson Registrars, and I'll just be helping to facilitate today's webinar. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance on the call. We're super happy to have you here. And there's just a few housekeeping notes I wanted to get through before we introduce today's speakers. First, all call participants are on mute just to ensure some good audio quality for you all, but we do absolutely want to address any questions you might have. We've set aside some time at the end of the presentation for a live Q&A with our presenters. So feel free to enter any questions you might have into the questions tab of the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. You don't have to wait until the end of the presentation to get those in there. So just go ahead and submit the questions as you think of them, just so you don't forget them. The number one question we usually get from everyone is regarding the availability of the slides or whether there will be a recording available afterwards. And the answer to both of those is yes. The slide deck will be available for download from our website at pjr.com, and a recording of the broadcast will also be available from our YouTube channel within about 24 to 48 hours of the webinar ending. And our YouTube channel is pretty easy to find. It's linked on our homepage of our website at pjr.com, as I said. Or you could just go to youtube.com and search for Perry Johnson Registrars, and it should be among the first couple of results. So this is just a quick screenshot to show you what to look for that question tab. It's going to open up like this. You can type a question in and click send, and it will populate for us to see, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the prepared slides. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our PJR speakers today. We have with us Terry Baboyage and Shannon Craddock. Terry Baboyage is the president of PJR. He has over 25 years of industry experience and certification. He's very passionate about customer satisfaction and providing value-added services to all of our clients. And Shannon is PJR's Programs and Accreditations Manager. She has over 20 years of certification industry experience and previously worked in the medical, management consulting, and automotive industries before she came to us at PJR. So Shannon and Terry, welcome. The floor is yours, so take it away.
Amy, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I want to just thank you for all you do. With the series of webinars that you put on in the past, I can tell you just do an outstanding job. And that means a lot to the company. And again, I want to thank you. With that said, also, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. Your time is very, very valuable, and I'm hoping you're going to get a lot out of this session. With that said, I'd like to also just have a little thanks go out and kudos to Shannon, because Shannon Craddock runs all of our programs and accreditations globally, and that is a massive job with thousands of clients and a global footprint that we have. And I have to just put my hat out to everything that she's had to go through in these very difficult times, because in the era of COVID, we were faced with some significant challenges. In fact, we're no different than a lot of other industries, and we had to be able to pivot and do things differently. And a lot of it had to do with how well we segue to do remote auditing. And there was a lot of great lessons learned with that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I would like, without further ado, go ahead and talk a little bit about our featured speaker today. And, Scott Dawson, I'd like to thank you and your team, and especially you personally, for the relationship that we've had probably now for the last 10 years. I've known Mr. Dawson and Core Business Solutions and their particular group. Obviously, as a certification body and a registrar, there's multiple different consultants we deal with, but I will tell you that there is a variation in quality and skill sets that people have. Just like you go to a doctor, there's a variation of how good that doctor is and how in his practice. And just like an attorney, there you know that there's different levels of attorneys. Well, there are different levels of consultants, and I can tell you that what we've been able to see and what Mr. Dawson's been able to do with, especially in the small business sector, has just been exceptional. And with that said, I'm going to ask Scott some questions, and this is meant to be an open format. And Scott, in talking a little bit about you and working with small businesses, obviously in the era of consulting, we had to deal with a lot of challenges as a certification body. But tell us some experiences that you've had, Scott, and what your company has had to deal with, and a little bit about your company background, and maybe just some lessons learned through all this. Scott?
Scott, I think you're just on mute there if you want to go ahead and click the unmute button.
Oh, I am. You're exactly right, Amy. Thank you for that. Well, good morning, Terry. Thanks so much for having me in this webinar today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And Shannon, good morning. Well, Terry, to answer your question, I know that you mentioned there's the challenges we're all facing, and I think the place to start a conversation is how this is impacting companies that are either certified, so these would be our clients, your clients, who are maintaining a certification, or they might have been in the middle of preparing to get certified, and this has disrupted, those objectives, those goals. Certainly raise questions for people. I like to start these conversations with how does it impact the client. Terry, have you guys had a lot of questions from clients with regard to how audits are conducted?
Oh, certainly. In fact, with us doing remote auditing and starting up really heavily, because obviously thousands of clients and certain sectors allow remote auditing, certain sectors do not allow remote auditing. Clients are obviously concerned, and clients need to be prepared. And obviously there are, we take a look at how clients proceed with consultants. Many of our clients have consultants, and so those consultants need to be aware of how we are doing our audits and being able to make sure that the clients are satisfied on the consulting side. So yes, a lot of concerns, Scott.
Yeah, I concur with all of that. I know, Terry, when the COVID crisis started to hit and we started to all understand the huge impact it was going to have not only on the certification sector, but all industries, one of the first phone calls I made was to you.
Right. I remember that call.
Trying to get our heads wrapped around how can the audit process continue. And our customers were calling us because, as you mentioned, a lot of businesses use consultants, and I'm guessing that if they weren't, calling their certification body, they were calling their consultant saying, "What's the impact here?" And
right.
We have an audit coming up in a month or whatever it is. Does this now affect all of that? So I think we were all just pulled into this quickly and have had to learn on the go. That is for sure. And I think we still are. I think we're all still adapting and adjusting. But a little bit about Core Business Solutions. We've been in business 20 years and focusing on small business and simplifying certification for small business throughout that time. And we've been fortunate in that we've been doing remote online consulting for 15 of the 20 years. So we were able to pivot pretty quick. Our consultants were quite experienced at working with clients, virtually or remotely. And it was a pretty smooth transition on our end. I know it was a heavier lift for PJR and all the registrars, because to a large degree, nearly all the auditing has been done on site. I think that's been one of the hallmarks of and quality control measures of auditing is that
right.
It's been on site. So it's certainly been a challenge. I know the clients are not only facing changes with their certifications, but just in their business. Some businesses have had to close temporarily or downsize or work remotely suddenly, or they have visitor restrictions. Maybe they're still running operations, but visitor restrictions sort of ties in with an auditor. So all of these things create a lot of complexity. But our online experience, I think, allowed us to pivot quickly. And a lot of the things we would normally do as a consultant on site at a customer facility, we just did remotely. And the show must go on, as they say. So that's kind of been our approach. Did you see the audit scheduling, the scheduling of audits, say in the April-May timeframe, immediately when all this was coming about? Did you see many of the scheduled audits be affected by the COVID?
Absolutely, Scott, but I'm going to let Shannon sort of chime in here too, because she's heavily involved with scheduling, but there was no question that we were scheduling and rescheduling. And Shannon, why don't you go ahead and comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think in the early stages, Terry, we did see a lot of clients wanting to delay their audits, and not necessarily due to health concerns. Certainly, if there is a health concern, either on the auditor's end or the client's end, that is first and foremost. We want to protect the health and safety of our auditors, our clients, and their families. But initially, there were some clients saying, what is this going to look like? What is the remote audit going to look like? So we've done a number of webinars to explain the process to clients. Obviously, what comes up is risk. Is the audit going to be as effective if we're doing the audit remotely? So what we're trying to do is take a look at the audit program, the 3-year strategy, and minimize the risk, and if possible, moving some of the shop floor elements to the 2021 audit so that we can cover more administrative aspects and ensure the effectiveness of the audit is maintained. And once clients understand that and get comfortable with the process, get comfortable with the platform we're typically using GoToMeeting, we've used Microsoft Teams and Skype for Business. If the client has a preferred tool, we'll use that as well, as long as it meets confidentiality and security screening. But I think that, Terry, as clients have become more comfortable with the process, they're really opening their arms. And I'm thankful that PGR began auditor training way back in Q4 2019, because even pre-COVID, we saw virtual auditing as becoming more and more dominant in the future, irregardless of COVID.
Yeah, I think that's the trend where things were going. And I can say that for clients that have had remote audits pre-COVID, let's say, they've appreciated the efficiency and the ability to involve people who aren't necessarily at their facility. That's certainly been a benefit there as well. But for those who have never experienced a remote audit, it's a different thing. And you try to overcome the challenges the best you can. And I know the procedures have changed, but you kind of roll with it and modify procedures. But we've had to help clients get used to the interactions remotely, the preparation steps remotely, the training that's needed for employees. All of that had to pivot for us, and our normal process, we were able to just switch over to the remote consulting model with all of our clients, and we're still doing that for most of our clients. So, but it's been an opportunity for us to show our own resiliency and exercise some muscles we probably haven't had to do. I know that technology has immediately become the centerpiece, and getting clients who maybe aren't as technical used to logging into a system or to show something, how do you show things that are in the physical world? How have you guys seen that challenge dealt with, where different documents and different other things that an auditor needs to see? How do you work through that?
Shannon?
Yeah, I'll happily field this question, Terry. We do, obviously, we're doing the screen sharing in one of the online platforms. Most client systems are virtual these days, but that's not always the case. And in those instances, we'll need to get creative, Scott. We'll do, clients will take pictures of hard copy documents or inspection records that may be completed pen and paper, and they're shared that way. But our auditors are resilient, they're versatile, and they're working with clients to make these audits successful.
Yeah, no, I've heard nothing but good things about the experience from clients' point of view. I mean, there's trepidation going into it, but coming out of it, it just seems like it's been great, and their confidence level, I think, of everyone has gone up in the recent months, certainly. You know, the other aspect of this, Terry, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. The other aspect of this is the needs for certification overall, and I think in some industry sectors, we've seen some level of increase in people inquiring about ISO 9001 and related standards. And maybe that's related to some of the disruption in supply chains and onshoring, planning that's going into removing risk in the supply chains and using certification as a tool. How do you view the overall economy, changes in the economy and this onshoring trend?
Well, certainly, and it's very interesting that you talk about this because, there's all talk about some of the manufacturing coming back and, from Asia, back to the United States. And I certainly think that companies are in the process of doing this. But I also think that there was an opportunity, when everything all started in March, for clients to get government subvention and the government money that was available. And I think some people, they were down. They were physically, their shops were down. And they took that opportunity they maybe have always wanted to get certified, and they maybe just always kicked that can down the road a bit. And they made those decisions to actually get it done. In fact, we found that just locally here by a local engineering company that was able to get it done in a very short time window. So, that's offered a lot of people the opportunity to do that. And some of the people had shorter staffs too. Frankly, there were layoffs. And we know when we quote clients from a registrar perspective, it's all quoted on employee counts. So maybe a certain audit might have been, 7 man-days on site, and now they have less employees, and all of a sudden that audit becomes a little bit easier to complete because there's less employees, there's less time to deal with. So yeah, I think that we've got a lot of moving parts here and a lot of clients taking advantage and a lot of new clients popping up doing work that need to get recognized. Mm-hmm. And there might be certain industries we talked before about, hey, listen, the aerospace commercial industry is down. However, there's still government work that has to be done and in RFQs that the government is still operating on from a defense side of things too. So yeah.
Well, I concur with you on your perspective there, Terry. I've heard that not only the federal government but some large corporations are taking this as an opportunity, if you will, of looking at their suppliers and number one, seeing if they have single source. Do they need to expand the number of providers or suppliers in a particular commodity? And if they are reliant on certain companies for delivery of products and services, what confidence do we have that through this tumultuous time, they're going to weather the storm and they're going to be reliable? And I think certifications are a piece of that. It's not all of it, but it's certainly a piece of that. So I think there's been, more inquiries regarding certification. In some cases, requirements are being imposed. And I think some companies, smaller companies in particular, are seeing the writing on the wall, if you will, but then, as you said, taking advantage of this slower time period. Not that that's a good thing, but you take advantage of it when you can, and
Right.
you knock the thing out,
Absolutely.
Well, I think it all falls within the element of risk, and since the standard is based, one of the principles there is risk-based thinking. I think that has gone into everybody's thought process. Our experience with the consultant side of the industry is there are hundreds, maybe thousands of consultants here in the US and Canada. Many of them work regionally. Many of them are sole proprietors that support their clients, and they're accustomed to working on site and kind of set up that way. And just like you guys had to pivot, I know our side of the industry has had to pivot, and I think it's been a challenge because while the audit takes 1 or 2 or 3 days to complete for a small business, most consulting engagements take more time than that. So I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd want to be on a go-to meeting or a Zoom for 3 or 4 days to do this. So it's not as easy as, hey, we'll just get on Zoom and do all of this. You got to, for when people are working online, like we have folks listening in here today, you can only have attention to these things for a shorter period of time. So it changes the whole workflow. It changes the scheduling for consultants and the training side of things. We've been able to over the years develop a robust training component with video instruction and such that can break up a lot of the instructional side of it, and it's been helpful to be able to lean on that. So now I know that not all of the audits can be done remotely, and I know, Shannon, you're going to talk to this in more detail, but why is it that some of the standards can be, or some of the states, different types of audits, why some of them can be done remotely and some can't?
I'm glad you bring that up, Scott. We do have a slide on that a little bit later. So I'll go through what's allowed and why some of the schemes are not allowing remote auditing, or they're limiting the remote auditing that they're allowing. Yeah. I do want to comment on a point that you made about, how tiring it must be to be on a 4-day virtual audit. So our auditors are really trying hard to keep the interviewee engaged. So we're being careful about the amount of time we're allotting to a process, and to give somebody a break from staring at a screen. We're, switching up the audit plan and, maybe picking up with one person a little bit later in the day or on the next day and moving on to a new process. I think one of the challenges of remote auditing is that you do lose that human element. And the chance for nonverbal cues and, feedback and dialogue that may not come as organically when you're doing remote auditing. So we're trying to be really cognizant of that and plan the audit so that there's, no screen fatigue by interviewing one contact for an exceptionally long period of time.
Yeah, you're not worried that the auditors get screen fatigue, right? I'm kidding.
Well, yeah, that has been a challenge. So, if somebody says, hey, you know what, I need to take a break, lunches really should be, walking away, getting some fresh air, and we're encouraging our auditors and our clients to do that so that they can come back refreshed.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important aspect of this, certainly.
Yeah, but one of the pros certainly is that, auditors now are logging more time with their head in their own bed. and less time overnight traveling. The job of an auditor is exhausting. You finish an 8-hour day, and sometimes you've got, a 2 to 3 hour flight and then a drive to the hotel room where you're staying to start the audit the next day at 8 a.m. So I know our auditors have really enjoyed extended time at home, extended time with their friends and family, to the extent that that's allowed. And that really has invigorated our auditor population. And they're thankful that we've presented all these opportunities to keep them as billable as they were pre-pandemic.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, you have so many highly experienced auditors. They do need to make a living through all this, as does everyone. And to be able to sustain that level of business is so important to hold on to the experience, because I know PJR in particular relies on highly experienced auditors, and they're kind of a special breed, and you have to work closely with them. I think that's been a perk, if you will, of these last few months.
Absolutely. And I do also, they've got to say that some of the auditors that are so used to being on the road, you look at some of the current restrictions that are happening. This state's got a quarantine for 14 days. You have this and that, and then comes to rescheduling. So it's been a great break for our auditors, and it's been awesome for them. They really do want to. They do like to be face to face, but they're looking at this from a long-term perspective and saying, listen, this is here to stay. And then the clients have got to like this too, because frankly, yes, we're a large registrar, obviously the largest CB and for QMS and EMS in the United States, but also from a travel perspective. Think about this: the clients get a chance not to have any travels, which is absolutely awesome. If they don't have to write a check for any kind of hotel expenses, any kind of airfare, et cetera, I mean, that's certainly a benefit on both sides.
Yeah, I have felt in this, as long as I've been in this industry, and I know you probably feel the same way. Travel really is no value add. I've kind of coined the term travel is evil. All it does is beat you down and cost you money, and now risk your health. And so, any chance we can not be doing that it's certainly more productive not to be on an airplane or in a car for periods of time. So, and that extra time is of value to clients, because the auditors have additional time to spend on preparation, and the consultants as well. They have extra time to get ready for an audit or work on their audit report instead of late at night in a hotel room,
right,
working on those things. So I think there's a qualitative benefit to some degree there. I mean, there's certainly the downside of not being able to be face to face, but that extra time is huge, and I think it passes on to our clients in terms of cost and efficiency and quality. I think as we handle it properly,
right?
And the technologies we've talked about that we're using. Certainly, web conferencing has been key, but we have also relied on our online platform, our core compliance platform, that has the training and the documents and the checklists and the forms and all the different things that we work through with a client in setting up their management system. And having those online resources is certainly helpful. We try to avoid, email as a platform, if you will, just due to the security. I know, Shannon, you brought up security of the meeting software. Well, there's also the security of sharing documents they have to be cautious of. So we try to stay within our secure system on that. And then Shannon, have you found your auditors wanting to see a facility, like go on a tour or a walkthrough remotely?
Yeah, that's going to happen, Scott. So what we do is we have somebody, walk around with an iPhone or an iPad or whatever technology the client has, and show the screen around. We're trying not to, for existing clients, we're trying not to put a new auditor into the mix. trying to make sure that the auditor that has been going to the facility and is familiar with the layout and what things look like is the one that's returning.
Yeah.
This, however, does present a challenge for new clients because a PGR auditor has never been on site. So we'll have to do that site tour virtually. And you know, our auditors and clients have adapted, but they need to understand the lay of the land. And that's allowing us to do that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, when you're on site with a client, it's so helpful just to look around and meet people and get I'll say it this way, a feel of the place, because it puts everything in context in a valuable way. So you're trying to replace that with the virtual, and it's honestly not as good in that respect, but you know, we certainly deal with that with more careful walkthrough, you know, asking the client to look at this or that in a little bit more detail, or circling back around when you get back to the meeting part of it, and digging into certain things. So it certainly affects our consultants' ability to understand the operation. So you have to just take it a different approach. But we're aware of it, certainly, and I think the technology today, boy, if this would have all happened, Terry, when you and I first met 10 years ago, the technology wasn't there.
I know, and internet connectivity was not there either, you know, and now things are getting better with internet connectivity. And Scott, we've had some snafus, obviously. I mean, you know, an auditor tries to go ahead and conduct an interview, maybe with a management rep, and they're on the shop floor, and all of a sudden the internet goes down, and that can detract sometimes from the time. There's a time element with that, trying to get that action back. But the auditors have to be able to think in their feet. You know, they have to call an audible. They gotta ad lib, and hey, sometimes they have to move that interviewee into the conference room, right? And conduct that, you know, watch what they, you know, do what they can on the floor, and then just sort of, you know, ad lib a little bit, and that's happened before too. So yeah, that's all a part of this, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, all of this practice we're having with remote conversations and discussions has helped me in my keep in touch with families and friends, because I'm better at it now.
Right.
Family shot, if I ever was. But yeah, it's certainly been an adjustment for everyone. I think from a client's point of view, going into either a consulting engagement or an audit with the attitude that the objective doesn't change, even though the format is different. And I know that the objective of establishing a very robust, effective management system that demonstrates results and can serve as a tool for a management team in driving continual improvement in their operation. That's still the objective. It's still the objective to meet all of the criteria for certification, and to demonstrate to customers and others who see the certification that it means certain things. When you see that certificate, especially you see a PJR stamp on a certificate, you know what that means. And we're certainly concerned about the human interaction element of this, fatigue and other time and things like that we talked about. But through all of that, the goal hasn't really changed. We're just having to do it a different way. Well, one other thought I wanted to drill. Shannon, were you going to jump in there? No? Okay, thought I heard something. Well, I think the supply chain aspect of this there's different dimensions of it, and we talked about disruption. We talked about risk and the assessment of risk from maybe a corporate point of view, looking at a supply base. But I think smaller companies need to consider how certification plays, or its importance in their suppliers, and the importance of them capturing new customers. And I think the thought of how resilient are we as a business, especially since we rely on the performance of our suppliers? I think that's a key consideration. I think one of the things we've been suggesting to our clients is to get your approved vendor list back out and go to your A-list suppliers that you are most reliant on, and in a sense reevaluate or ask some additional questions regarding the capabilities of those suppliers to weather the storms that we're going through now and weather the storms that are going to come. Well, none of us know how this is going to play out in the coming months or years. We all are hopeful that, you know, medical community is going to come up with a solution. We're all going to get a vaccine, and that'll be that. But I doubt it'll be that smooth, and I think there's going to be ups and downs, and certainly using the filter of a management system to gain confidence in suppliers is really what it's about, and asking questions of your suppliers, whether or not they either are certified or are considering certification, I think is an opportunity to re-engage on some of those conversations, because we are going to need our suppliers to be as strong as we are going forward, and that's going to mean flexibility, and it's going to mean their ability to manage their business effectively, and by the way, manage their suppliers. So I think the topic of certification is something to get back on the agenda, especially with A-list suppliers that you rely on so much. Do you anticipate that same type of a change, Terry?
Well, we would certainly like to think so. And, you know, we all know that, you know, clients fall into several different categories. I know clients have good intentions and they want to think that, you know, maybe I'm letting this supplier go. They're a supplier that is, you know, been working with us for a long time. They've had good quality, but now it's time to step up and show me, you know. So, you know, there's always that push. There's always, and clients, you know, have good intentions and want to get certified, but a lot of times they kick the, like I say, they put it off. There's no better time than now to be able to say, listen, I'm going to make sure I create a legacy for my company. I want my company to be around in the next 10 years. The strong will survive, and ISO 9000 or 14000 or whatever the standard might be is that mechanism to show that I have strength and I am putting that extra step forward. And I not only want to make my people happy, that I want to continue to supply, but I want to expand my business. Bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are ways to do it. I mean, I guess that's our message here today. Is the certification industry goes on, and we're adapting, and I think it's been really encouraging to see the embrace of technologies in new ways or expanded ways, I guess is probably a better way to say that, to get it done. And it's certainly been a challenge. You know, it's not 9001. I know I've used that as kind of the example here today, but it isn't only about 9001. You mentioned 14001, the environmental standard, but I kind of see resiliency as a supplier as a three-pronged issue. And so this diagram kind of illustrates that. One is the capability of a supplier to consistently meet requirements through their products and services, otherwise known as a quality management system. And that's the aim of ISO 9001 and the industry sector certifications, AS 9100, 9120, the automotive IATF standard, and there are others that kind of are in that vein of foundational certification. And we've seen more demand in information security for the same reasons that we've talked, that information sharing with suppliers and customers is all the more important now in this world where people are working from their homes. They're not necessarily working from the protection of their company network.
Right.
And so ISO 27001 and other information security standards, CMMC, the one that the DoD is coming out with, I think that's another aspect of it, is how do you assure to customers that you're going to treat data carefully, and it's not just a customer issue, but that's certainly part of it. And then one that people may not be familiar with is the 22301 business continuity standard. That's more about how you weather storms and how prepared are you for various disruptive events like the one we're going through right now. So 22301, I don't know that the number of certifications is all that high here in the US. Maybe you know more about that, Terry, than I, but it has a outstanding methodology to it that I think any company could benefit from. And I'd encourage folks who are on the call here today to look that one up, 22301. And it's that business continuity. Do you guys certify to 22301, correct?
We do compliance to 22301. We have been talking about it for many, many years. It seems like there's not been a massive push. We're getting a bigger push in Europe right now on business continuity, but there's significant increase in activity that we're seeing in 27001, Scott. And this is a standard. And tell us a little bit about tell me a little bit about what you're getting in terms of, the size of the clients. Why are they getting 27001? What's been maybe the last several clients you've, what's been the main impetus? Has it been coming from mainly the smaller clients that you're getting, or tell me more about what
it seems to be smaller clients. The trend seems to be to get to smaller clients because typically, if there's sensitive information being exchanged, and in some industry sectors, it's particularly sensitive. And I highlight what the Department of Defense is doing with their CMMC because they're protecting our soldiers by protecting the information. But that's just an example. There are other industry sectors where information is so critical. And the smaller companies are starting to be asked about information security certifications. And the challenge is smaller companies don't have the IT experience typically. They don't have security specialists available or on site.
Right.
So it's a challenge. So when we're working with a 27001 client, particularly small business, we break it down into the bite-sized chunks, and we involve the IT resources, even if they're external, say an external managed service provider. We would include them and involve them in the preparation so that this international standard can be met. But it seems that it's smaller clients, a lot of government contracts. It seems like it's a default in some of the sectors. You see 9001, 27001, the ISO 20000, which is a service standard, and a few others that just seem to be much more commonplace. Now, the other piece of this is the similarities between these things. That's a good news, I think, part of this. There's much of this, the approach is overlap. So you don't start from scratch when you have one of these and you're adding another one. I know integrated management systems and integrated audits are one of the ways of approaching these multiple certifications. I know your group does integrated audits, correct?
Oh yeah, more and more of our clients are becoming integrated. They start with a foundation with ISO 9000, then they find that, customer demands are such where, hey, listen, you need this, and so they get a great foundation that they can start with, right? And the same thing with the information security. Now, there's some complexity to 27001, Scott. So I can see how clients would want to seek your help to be able to, as opposed to hiring additional staff, having to get the knowledge, right?
Yeah. We've definitely seen that, Terry. I don't think people are. It's not, especially for a small business. It's really not easy to just jump right into a stage 1 audit. without having some kind of expert help externally to get ready. Generally, our clients need, 4 to 8 months of preparation for an ISO 27001 audit, unless they've been practicing a lot of the security requirements for a number of years, and they're really just putting the management system element in place.
Yeah.
But that's pretty rare. That's pretty rare. A lot of times there are some significant upgrades and training that need to be done. So breaking it down into manageable parts and pieces that everybody can understand, not just the geeks among us. Because I'm not really a geek on the technology side, so I need things presented slowly when I get into that. That's certainly true. So,
and I think one of the things we're going to be seeing, Terry and Scott, as we all step back and take a deep breath, and hopefully things get better in the very near future. I think many customers, many OEMs are going to be flowing down either 22301 certification conformance, either wholly or partially with the standard as a contractual requirement in light of the lessons learned from this pandemic.
Sure.
So even if an organization doesn't get third-party certification to this standard, I think there are going to be some requirements flow down via contractual documents, terms and conditions about some type of emergency preparedness and response.
Yeah, I think that's one of the keys. I think, Shannon, is looking in your contracts for different kinds of languaging around the business continuity or resilience or disaster planning, or disaster recovery, although there are different ways it can be described. But I know this standard, particularly for those who are familiar with ISO 9001, it's going to seem familiar to you with just a different focus and some different process requirements. But it's still a management system and can fit right in with what you do normally. So it's definitely one to look up. I think that would be a good one. Now, Shannon, I know you have been right at the front lines of dealing with the powers that be, the accreditation bodies and other regulatory agencies that set the rules for auditing. It wasn't like PJR had carte blanche, just, hey, make adjustments and we'll just go with the flow. Well, there's no flow to go with. They tell you what you can and can't do. And I know you were able to put together this chart, but do you want to just talk about kind of what we mentioned earlier about the trend with regard to incorporating remote auditing into the certifications?
Certainly, Scott. So as you can see from the chart, there are a number of schemes: 9001, 14001, 45001, 13485, 27001, Rios, TL 9000, and e-Stewards that have given us a lot of flexibility. So stage 1, stage 2 surveillance and recertification audits can be done remotely. And I caution that they can be done remotely. We're still going to engage in a risk analysis and make sure it's appropriate to do those audits remotely. So the accreditation bodies have said, if you do the diligence and you feel that the risk is minimal, you can proceed with remote auditing. Aerospace is a little bit more rigid. So they're allowing stage 1s to be done virtually. We do, however, need to ask for approval from our accreditation body for the scheme, the ANAB, via OASIS. So on a case-by-case basis, every time we're looking to do a stage 1, we have to ask for permission to do it virtually. Up to 30% of the stage 2 can be done virtually if it's a COVID-related reason. There's a travel restriction, the organization's not allowing visitors, there's a quarantine period, whatever the case may be. And surveillance can be 100% remote if it's due to COVID. IATF has taken a very firm stance, and they're not allowing any remote or virtual auditing. So stage 1, stage 2, surveillance and recertification audits all need to be done on site. They are allowing a grace period, however, regarding the timing of these audits. So typically surveillance audits, there's about a 1-month grace period around the anniversary date. They're allowing an additional 90 days, and if you need to go into a second 90 days, the certificate is suspended, which is unfortunate, but they have introduced something known as a monitoring event, where a client will review certain documents with the client virtually, even though they don't allow virtual auditing, in an attempt to see if that can count as a surveillance. However, the 2021 audit will then be equivalent in duration to a recertification audit if it's a surveillance, and equivalent to a stage 2 if the next audit's a recertification. So the IETF standard for the automotive industry, that really represents one where there's been minimal flexibility. For the responsible recycling standard, and as you know, Scott, PGR is the largest certifier in the world for this particular standard. The stage 1 can be done remotely. However, the stage 2 must be done on site, if that's the case. If the stage 1 is done on site, up to 50% of the stage 2 can be done remotely. Surveillances can be done remotely, which is good. And PGR is currently involved in a pilot program with Surrey, who owns the R2 standard, on piloting some recertification audits remotely, and hopefully we'll get approval to do that. As far as FSSC 22000, the stage 1s can be virtual, stage 2s must be on site, and surveillance can be partially remote. You'll note, however, that there's a risk analysis required for all standards, and even if a remote audit is allowed, we have to make sure it makes the best sense and that we can take steps to mitigate that risk. And I've already talked about revising the audit program to allow for the audit of less risky requirements or elements in the 2021 calendar year audit, and then moving some of the more challenging elements to 2021.
So you guys just can't make up the rules. I mean, that's, I've always commented that the consultants don't have to follow all the rules. We just have to know what they are. You guys have to actually follow the rules, and in some cases help to pilot some changes, as you mentioned with R2. But it's I think the key is, if you're a company that's either considering your certification in the near future, maybe you're in the middle of preparation and you're getting quotes, you know, from PJR or others on your initial certification, you've got to talk about what can and can't be done remotely. And that's true of your upcoming surveillance and recertifications. Get on the phone, have the conversations, right?
Right. And for those clients that are just getting started and are looking to schedule that stage 2 audit, my advice to you would be, don't wait. We've demonstrated a lot of success, a lot of client and auditor satisfaction with the remote audits where they're allowed, and now is the time. If your business is slower, now is the time to ramp up certification efforts, allocate the resources to your implementation, and proceed full steam ahead with gaining certification. And the great thing, Scott, is there's going to be some cost savings because there'll be minimized travel costs.
Yep.
You may not be paying for airfare, hotel, rental car, per diem, if we're able to conduct the audit remotely.
Yeah, that's the thing. Same on the consulting side, Shannon, that the remote online consulting engagements certainly are less expensive.
And the last thing the client wants to do, and will have tremendous remorse if they could just, you know, could kick themselves for not getting it done. This is the time, like you said, Shannon, to do it. Hey, it's remote. The auditor's not even there on site. Take full advantage of getting it done. Don't all of a sudden, you know, put it off and then say, oh my God, our certificate is now lapsed. Now I have to go through this whole thing over again when I could have just got it done. You know, so I think if you live by that mantra, I think you jump right in, and I think you'll find that the experience is a good experience. And the reality is this is going to be here to stay. I really do think that virtual will be not only here to stay, but we're going to have even more and more of a trend. And I do think there'll be lessons learned by some of the oversight bodies and the different scheme owners. For instance, if you look at the red chart in front of you where it says IETF stage 1 audit, no remote virtual audits allowed. Well, look at the aerospace industry. Certainly the aerospace industry has a lot more risk than the automotive industry. And they're allowing that. So hopefully some of these lessons learned will go on to other scheme owners, and they'll see this and they'll just make common sense of this. But sometimes people move a little slower than others, and it takes time for people to react. And I do think that you're going to see some reaction from those industries, I'm hoping, and also in R2. So we will see.
Yeah, and regardless of the disruption that a company is experiencing, maybe some work at home or reduction in force or other disruptions in their supply or whatever, that doesn't mean you can't work toward an upcoming audit, whether it's for certification or maintaining your certification. But and if you want guidance and direction on how to deal with these things that you're overcoming, I know our consultants have seen so much and worked with so many different situations that we can help walk them through all those preparations and make sure it's a good experience when they get to the audit, certainly. Terry, I had my eye on the clock, and I know we have a few minutes here left, and would certainly welcome questions. So if you guys want to use the Q&A feature that Amy pointed out when we started, we'll be glad to take questions.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, you guys. Great discussion so far. I do just want to remind everybody, please get those questions in. We'll try to answer as many as possible, even if we go over time just a little bit. I hope you guys can all stick around for that. I'm just going to have the contact information both for Scott at CORE himself, and then I'll also have the contact information for PJR up on the screen during these questions. So let me go ahead and unlock the question panel, and I'll see what we've got. It looks like we have not necessarily a question, but more of a statement from Dan. So maybe you guys could respond to this. Dan says that his company does not have much by the way of video conferencing equipment, since it's not really a priority for them to invest in the type of technology. What suggestions might you have for Dan, or how would you handle a situation like that for a client?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will say from the consulting side, that's the only real thing necessary is to have a fairly up-to-date computer and a good internet connection, because while a camera might be useful, for some things, I wouldn't call it absolutely necessary, and certainly special equipment isn't necessary. But if you can stream videos on YouTube, you can get involved in one of these meetings. Like today, we're not using video cameras, but we're able to connect to the meeting and share information that is on our computers. So Shannon, I don't know if that's your advice as well, that you could still proceed without any special equipment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Scott. Just having, your folks with fairly update desktops or laptops. And then in the third-party audit, if we do need to do a plant tour, an iPhone or any type of smartphone with a decent camera and good a good Wi-Fi should be able to do the job.
Yeah, good.
All right, great. We've got a question here from Tim. Tim says that his organization has ISO 914 and IATF 16949. And obviously, as you all covered very thoroughly, IATF is not allowing any kind of virtual audits. He's wondering if there may be a reduction in cost to go virtual just for ISO 9 and 14.
Certainly the audit days won't change. But there will be a cost savings if he proceeds with his 9001 and 14001 audits remotely, and the auditor costs will be minimized or non-existent.
Because it's remote.
Definitely talk to your scheduler, Scott, about getting that done.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. Okay, we've got a question here from Jim. Jim's wondering if there's any other resources specific to PJR's virtual audits that might be available. I know personally I can speak to this. We do have an upcoming session of our virtual audits overview webinar with Joe Krolikowski. Shannon, are there any other resources you think you could offer?
There is some content on our website, but I think attending that free webinar given by Joe will be most helpful.
Yeah, and just like the rest of our webinars, we've got a couple others coming up in the next couple of months, and we've got more scheduled that have not yet been posted to the website that we're still working out dates for. But all of our webinars can be found on our website to sign up for on the training tab up at the top. There should be a drop down that says upcoming webinars, and you should be able to register. They're all free, of course. Let's see. We have a question from Laura. Laura, this is for Shannon. We're certified with PJR. Our recert is coming up in December. Is it too late to change to remote if possible?
Yeah, so we'd have to look at the standard and what area of the country you're in. But if there are any concerns relative to risks from COVID, it's not too late to change your on-site audit to a virtual audit. So we'll want to look and understand your specific circumstances and make sure that we're making the best decision regarding that. I'd encourage you to contact your scheduler and they can walk you through that process.
All right. I know we're running short on time. We've got a couple more little questions here that I just wanted to squeeze in. Thank you all for your patience. There's a question and a statement from Steve. Steve wonders if the general consensus seems to be that remote auditing is here to stay. He does say that he had a surveillance audit in June, which was face-to-face with social distancing without issue. And they had discussed a remote audit, but face-to-face worked out fine. So he is wondering, is remote auditing here to stay? And then I would further the question personally, where do you see it going from here? I mean, what kind of technological developments do you think might be helpful or down the road for virtual auditing?
Sure, I'd be happy to field that, Amy. And I think that question is really important today. So certainly virtual auditing is here to stay. And, you know, there may be reasons in the future where we're conducting virtual audits that are completely independent of COVID. Certainly, as there are health and safety risks and it's better to do audits remotely, we're going to continue to do that. But I don't see any reason why a portion of every audit in the future can't be done virtually. I think we've proven the effectiveness of auditing some components of a management system using virtual audit techniques. And if an organization is happy and wants to do it that way, we can certainly continue to do that. Now, there are some standards that won't allow that once we're past the pandemic. And certainly there are some parts of a management system audit that are more effective face-to-face. So we're going to look at all those risks. We're going to discuss client preferences and, of course, follow accreditation criteria. But in short, I see virtual auditing as something that we've proven effective, at least in some capacities, and it will continue in the future.
All right, it looks like that was the last of the questions that had come in. If anyone has any others, please just shoot them over. And if you had any questions that were maybe more specific or you didn't want discussed live in front of an audience, please do feel free to reach out to either Scott or us here at PJR, and we'd be more than happy to answer those questions offline. So while we give another second for anyone to ask questions, any parting words from our panelists or words of encouragement regarding virtual auditing?
Well, I would say that this is a time for companies to find a way to embrace the change that you're facing. I mean, markets are disrupted right now, including the certification market. And when disruption happens, there are opportunities, the glass half full, approach rather than the glass half empty approach. And getting certification done and certainly maintaining the investment in your certifications, now is the time to focus on that. And I guess our combined message, Terry, here today is, both the consulting sector and the accreditation body or the registrars have embraced this new approach and are adapting within the guidelines and the rules that need to be followed. But there's no reason not to move forward, I guess is my point.
I wholeheartedly agree, Scott. Fear, everybody I know in the very beginning was very, very concerned and very fearful. Once you go through a virtual audit, it sets the tone. You get a chance to be able to really embrace the technology. And technology will, the prior question, talked about where's technology going. I mean, we're gonna be experimenting with different platforms and using the Google glasses and different things, and things will improve, and connectivity will improve, things will improve, and so there will always be improvements in this area. But yeah, have no fear. That would be the parting comment that I would have to say.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I could see virtual reality fitting in here somewhere someday. So that might, make the audits more, at least more personal when we get to that level.
Yeah, most definitely. It looks like we did have one more question come in, and I do apologize to Andy. I had seen his question earlier, and it accidentally was cleared out of the question queue. So I'm glad you resubmitted it, Andy. He is wondering how a virtual tour via FaceTime or another option might be possible if the plant is explosion rated and no electronics are allowed. Is there a possible alternative?
No, and that would be an instance, Amy, where we obviously, if cell phones were not allowed on the shop floor, and that happens. There's certain black box areas of various facilities that we can access, so we would lose that option. So, in the future, remote auditing, full remote auditing may be limited at that particular facility.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you guys all so much. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I'm glad we got to touch on all of them. If you did have any other questions or you wanted more in-depth answers on anything discussed, please, as I said, feel free to contact either Scott at CORE or us here at PJR, and we'll be more than happy to elaborate. So just in parting, before I close things out, I want to thank our speakers again for their time and expertise. And I want to wish everyone a happy and safe and healthy rest of the week. So thank you all for attending, and have a good one.
Amy, thanks for moderating. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.